refrigerator and the occasional tick of the wall clock. Michael leaned against the counter, his eyes falling idly on Rachel's purse resting beside the grocery bag she'd just unloaded. The day's weariness pressed down on him, but something about the way her purse sat open, almost beckoning, caught his attention. With a faint sigh, he moved closer, intending only to clear it away when a small piece of folded paper slipped from the bag's side pocket. It fluttered to the floor, and without thinking, he reached down to retrieve it. As he unfolded the note, his casual glance turned sharp. The handwriting was delicate, unfamiliar, and entirely too intimate. "Last night was perfect. Until we meet again. Yours, A." The words burned into his mind, each letter a painful confirmation of the unease he'd been carrying for weeks. He swallowed a slow, controlled breath as the note lay in his hand, stark and undeniable. Michael's heartbeat slowed, and a cold resolve settled over him. There would be no accusations, no impulsive showdown. Instead, he slipped the note back into the purse, closed it carefully, and placed it back on the counter exactly as he'd found it. A new plan was forming in his mind, quiet and methodical. Rachel wouldn't know he knew not yet. He would be patient, deliberate, and watchful, unraveling her lies until there was nothing left to hide behind. For now, he would wait. But when the moment came, Rachel would be left with no escape. That evening, as Michael cleared the dinner table, he watched Rachel with new eyes. She was relaxed, unwinding after her day, scrolling through her phone as if nothing was amiss. There was a lightness to her, a slight smile as she tapped out a quick message. For a moment he wondered if it was to him, the man whose name he now knew only as A. But he kept his expression neutral, arranging the dishes as though everything was perfectly ordinary. He had always been a calm man, steady, and even now, in the face of what he'd discovered, he would not let his emotions betray him. No, tonight would be about setting the first of many subtle traps. "Busy day?" he asked, casually drying his hands on a dish towel as he watched her from across the kitchen. His voice was light, as though nothing had changed. Rachel looked up, a faint glint of something in her eyes. Was it surprise? Guilt? Or perhaps he was only imagining it? "Yes, a bit," she replied, smiling softly. "The usual, you know." Her answer was vague, but that was nothing unusual. Rachel often spoke in generalities, dancing around details. He realized, perhaps for the first time, how often he had allowed her to do this to maintain a comfortable distance from him without ever really being questioned. "I'd love to know more about your day," he said, putting just the right amount of warmth into his tone. He wanted to seem interested but not pressing, conversational but not too attentive. "Oh, you wouldn't find it that exciting," she laughed, her eyes flitting away. "Just errands, a bit of shopping, that sort of thing." Michael nodded slowly, filing away her response. Shopping, errands. A simple, harmless day on the surface. But he knew better now. He felt his patience solidifying into something colder, something harder. He'd wait and watch for these small lies, collect them one by one. Eventually, they would form a net around her, and he'd pull it tight. "Well, I like hearing about it anyway," he said with a small smile. "It makes me feel closer to you." The words tasted bitter, but he held his gaze steady, gauging her reaction. Rachel hesitated just for a beat before smiling back, her face softening. "You're sweet, Michael." She crossed the room, planting a small, affectionate kiss on his cheek before she disappeared up the stairs, leaving him alone. Once he heard her close the bathroom door, he moved quickly. He scanned her purse again, this time noting the subtle details: an extra compact mirror, a lipstick he'd never seen her wear. Small changes, but changes nonetheless. The faintest scent of unfamiliar cologne clung to the leather. These details, trivial on their own, would become fuel for his plan. He retreated to his office, where he opened a new folder on his computer, labeling it simply Rachel. He entered the first line, typing slowly, methodically. "Discovered love note, signed by A. Possible evidence of infidelity." Details: handwriting unfamiliar, tone intimate. Date: September 16th, 9:34 p.m. He stared at the line for a long moment, the reality of it sinking deeper with every keystroke. This was no longer a suspicion, but a growing collection of facts, each one pushing him closer to a confrontation he was determined to win. And as he sat back, feeling the thrill of control settle over him, he knew that this was only the beginning. Over the next few days, Michael moved through his routines with an almost exaggerated normalcy, giving Rachel no reason to suspect that anything had shifted between them. He was careful to keep his tone warm, his glances unthreatening, his touches familiar but measured. In each interaction, every small detail became a piece of the puzzle he was slowly assembling. One evening, as they sat side by side on the couch, Rachel scrolling through her phone while Michael pretended to focus on a magazine, he decided to slip in the first subtle test. "So," he said, with a casualness he'd perfected over years of quiet observation. "Did you end up getting that coffee with Susan?" He named one of her friends, remembering that Rachel had once claimed they'd meet up soon. In truth, he knew she hadn't seen Susan for weeks. Rachel looked up, surprised, and hesitated for the briefest second. "Oh yes," she replied, nodding quickly. "We did, actually, just the other day. It was good to catch up." Michael hummed, nodding as if he hadn't caught the lie. But internally, he felt the pieces click into place. Her hesitation, the forced brightness in her voice, he could see through it all now. The lie hung in the air between them, silent yet solid, and he added it to the mental ledger he kept in the back of his mind. He leaned forward, feigning interest. "That's great," he said warmly. "Did you talk about anything interesting? I know you two always have the best stories." He smiled, watching her closely. Rachel hesitated again, her eyes flitting toward the floor, her fingers absent-mindedly tapping against the edge of her phone. "Nothing special, really," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Just, catching up on life." He watched as she slipped back into her phone, her shoulders visibly relaxing. He felt an odd satisfaction knowing he could provoke these subtle reactions from her tiny cracks in the foundation of her lies. Later that night, after Rachel had fallen asleep, Michael lay awake in the dark, piecing together everything he'd learned. Each detail, each lie, was another thread he could pull to unravel the tapestry of her deception. There was a growing excitement within him, a quiet thrill in being the one with the hidden advantage. The next morning, over breakfast, he slid another question into the conversation. "So," he said, watching her over his coffee mug, "I was thinking we should go somewhere, just the two of us. Maybe a weekend trip? It's been a while since we had time alone." Rachel's spoon clattered lightly against her bowl as she looked up, clearly caught off guard. "Oh, she stammered, "that sounds nice, Michael, but I actually have plans with Sarah next weekend. I promised her I'd help out with something." She trailed off, her eyes darting away, and Michael merely nodded, pretending not to notice her discomfort. "Of course," he replied, his voice even. "Maybe another time, then." As she finished her breakfast, he began mentally cataloging her excuse, another line to add to the file he was quietly compiling. When she left for work, he watched her from the window, her figure growing smaller as she backed out of the driveway. Once her car had disappeared down the street, he turned and returned to his office, opening the folder again. Lie 2, coffee with Susan, false. Lie 3, weekend plans with Sarah. Date, September 22nd, 8:10 a.m. Each entry felt like a victory, each record a step closer to understanding the full scope of her betrayal. It wasn't just the affair that drove him now, but the thrill of knowing more than she did, of slowly dismantling her lies without her even realizing. In those moments, Michael knew he could wait as long as it took for her to dig herself deeper, until the weight of her own lies finally brought her to the point of no escape. And then he would make his move. The weeks stretched on, each day layering Michael's growing archive of Rachel's deceptions. The thrill of hidden knowledge simmered beneath his calm exterior, sharpening his focus on every detail and amplifying the satisfaction of each small discovery. He had become a quiet, relentless investigator in his own home, and Rachel remained blissfully unaware. One evening, as they cleaned up after dinner, Michael noticed Rachel's phone lighting up on the counter beside the sink. A message preview flashed briefly on the screen. "Can't wait to see you again." It was from a contact saved simply as A. The sight of it, a tangible confirmation of the affair, struck him with a surge of silent anger. But he maintained his cool, carefully averting his eyes so Rachel wouldn't notice him looking. If anything, this message was proof that his patience was paying off. Later that night, Michael waited until Rachel had drifted off to sleep before slipping quietly out of bed. Her phone lay charging on the nightstand, the screen dark, unaware of the intrusion. He had studied her password enough times to guess it correctly, and soon he was scrolling through her messages, his heart pounding steadily in his chest. The texts between Rachel and A were intimate, filled with declarations of longing and the kind of honesty she once reserved only for him. They detailed plans, stolen moments, and promises for more time together. It was all he needed to confirm what the note had suggested weeks before. But it wasn't just about confirmation anymore, it was about control, about gathering every possible piece of evidence until her lies were undeniable, even to her. Michael documented each incriminating message, capturing screenshots and emailing them to a secure address he'd created for this purpose. He returned the phone to its original place and slipped back under the covers, listening to Rachel's steady breathing as he filed each new piece of information away in his mind. The next morning, as he drank his coffee, he studied Rachel as she moved around the kitchen, humming softly to herself. She seemed lighter, happier, as though her life had gained a secret excitement that he wasn't a part of. It was a bitter irony. He knew more about her now than he had in years. Yet she saw him as oblivious, a steady presence she didn't think twice about. "So," he ventured, breaking the silence with a casual tone, "I was thinking of changing a few things in the office. Maybe moving my files and computer setup downstairs so I can work more freely." "Oh?" Rachel asked, her expression showing polite interest. "Yeah, just to keep things organized," he replied, gauging her reaction as he spoke. "I thought it might help me keep track of all my projects better." Rachel nodded, her attention already shifting, oblivious to the real reason behind his proposed change. He wasn't actually moving his files, of course. What he wanted was to gauge her reaction to the idea of new activity in the house, to see if it unnerved her to think he might be getting more organized. Her nonchalance gave him his answer. She still had no clue that he was watching. Later, he added more to his private folder, including the screenshots from her texts and a new note about her relaxed demeanor. As the evidence mounted, he felt a cold satisfaction building. He was getting closer step by step, and the knowledge emboldened him. His file now spanned pages, each lie and inconsistency carefully noted and dated. The case against Rachel was strong, but Michael was patient. He knew that when the moment came, he would reveal everything with devastating precision, leaving her no room to run, no excuse to hide behind. The time was nearing, and he was determined to savor every moment leading up to her inevitable downfall. Michael's investigation continued in silence, each new clue adding another thread to the web he wove around Rachel's secret. He perfected the art of being unnoticed, listening without reacting, remembering without letting on. Rachel's phone remained a goldmine, with each new message from A offering another glimpse into the life she thought she kept hidden from him. One Saturday morning, as Rachel prepared to leave for yet another outing with a friend, Michael leaned against the doorframe, watching her zip up her jacket. He noted the extra care she put into her appearance, the slight flush of anticipation on her cheeks. It was an expression he hadn't seen in years, and it made his stomach twist with a mixture of resentment and grim determination. "Where are you off to today?" he asked casually, forcing a lightness into his voice. "Oh, just meeting Sarah for brunch," Rachel replied quickly, her eyes darting to the side for a moment, just long enough to give her away. "We might do some shopping afterward." Michael nodded, playing along. "That sounds nice. Tell Sarah I said hello." "I will," she replied, smiling as she grabbed her purse. But there was something in the tightness of her smile, a small tell that only confirmed what he already knew: she was lying again. It was a small misstep, but it added fuel to his quiet fury. As the door closed behind her, Michael turned to the window, watching her car disappear down the street. He waited for a few minutes before heading upstairs to their bedroom, where her laptop lay on the dresser. He had thought about looking through it before, but had held back, not wanting to risk tipping her off too soon. But now he felt confident he could get in and out without leaving a trace. He opened the laptop, entering her password, a simple phrase he had overheard her use many times. The screen unlocked, and he began his search, skimming through emails and browsing history. He found mundane correspondence with friends, work emails, and the usual array of online shopping receipts. But then, buried in her drafts folder, he found something that caught his eye: a half-written message addressed to Ah. It read like a confession of sorts, a stream of thoughts Rachel hadn't yet had the courage to send. "I wish things were different. I wish I didn't feel this need to hide every time we meet. I know I'm lying to him, but I don't know how to stop, and I'm scared of what will happen when it all comes out. I can't keep pretending everything is fine with Michael." Michael's breath caught as he read the words, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. He stared at the screen, the faint buzzing in his ears growing louder. So she knew it would come crashing down eventually. She was afraid of what he might do, afraid of how he would react when he found out. Yet she had continued, taking the risk over and over again. He took a deep breath, fighting the urge to delete the draft or send it on her behalf. He knew that wouldn't help him now. He needed to keep his cool, stick to the plan. He copied the text and saved it with the rest of his evidence before carefully closing the laptop and returning it to its exact position on the dresser. Downstairs, he poured himself a fresh cup of coffee, the bitterness of the brew matching the taste in his mouth. He settled into his chair by the window, waiting for her to return, his mind racing through the possibilities. Each step in his investigation had brought him closer to the edge. But now he realized he was nearing a turning point. Rachel's draft message hinted at a breaking point, hers, and perhaps even his own. By the time she returned, late in the afternoon, he had calmed the turmoil in his mind. He watched her through the kitchen doorway as she came in, carrying shopping bags, her face flushed with the glow of her secret day. She gave him a bright smile, the kind he had once treasured, but now it only deepened his resolve. "How was brunch?" he asked, keeping his tone easy. "It was nice," she said, a little too quickly. "Sarah says hi, by the way." Michael nodded, taking another sip of his coffee. "That's great to hear. You should invite her over sometime. I'd love to catch up with her." He watched her carefully as he spoke, seeing the brief flicker of tension in her face before she covered it with a smile. "I'll see if she's free next weekend," Rachel replied, slipping out of her shoes and heading up the stairs, leaving him alone once more. As he listened to her footsteps retreating, Michael felt the balance of power shifting. He had glimpsed her fear, the uncertainty beneath her lies. And for the first time, he sensed the endgame approaching. All he needed now was the right moment to turn her world upside down. He would make sure it was a moment she never saw coming. The draft message had been the most damning clue yet, and Michael couldn't shake the satisfaction of knowing Rachel's own words would be part of her undoing. Her confession, hidden away in a file, was a raw, vulnerable piece of her that she hadn't been able to share with anyone, not even her lover. But he could wait a little longer. He wanted the truth to hit her like a tidal wave, with no shelter to shield her from the wreckage. In the following days, Michael grew bolder, testing her lies more directly. Each time she offered an excuse, he'd prod a little further, always playing the part of the patient, trusting husband, masking his growing contempt. His latest tactic was subtle, barely noticeable, a slow shift in their conversations, an invitation to share more details, knowing she'd stumble over her fabrications. One night over dinner, he asked innocently, "Are you and Sarah planning to get together again this weekend? You two have really been close lately." He watched her closely, studying the way she hesitated, her fork pausing in midair. Actually, no," she said, her eyes darting away as she set her fork down. "She's going out of town visiting family. I'll probably just stay home." "Sounds nice," he replied, forcing a smile. "Maybe we could spend some time together then. A quiet weekend for just the two of us?" She looked up, her face a mask of polite surprise, and nodded. "Sure, that would be nice," she said, but her voice held a note of forced enthusiasm. She was already thinking of an escape, he could see it in her eyes. Later that evening, as they sat side by side on the couch, Michael held her hand, running his thumb gently over her knuckles. She was distracted, flipping through a magazine, her mind clearly elsewhere. But Michael's grip tightened ever so slightly, a silent reminder that he was still here, watching her every move. "You seem tired," he said softly. "Anything on your mind?" She shifted, uncomfortable under his gaze, and shook her head with a forced laugh. "Just a long week, that's all. Nothing unusual." But she couldn't meet his eyes, her body tensing as though she felt the weight of his scrutiny. Once she was asleep that night, he returned to her phone, looking for anything that might confirm her plans for the weekend. Sure enough, a message from A appeared, counting down the days. "I'll pick you up at noon. Can't wait." Michael took a screenshot, cataloging it meticulously. Her promise of a quiet weekend was another layer in her growing web of lies, each one entwined with the next. He was ready to end it, but he knew he needed one final, conclusive moment, an encounter that would leave her with no room for denial. On Friday evening, he made his move. After Rachel had gone to bed, he placed a discreet recording device near the front door, the place she'd have to pass on her way out to meet her lover. He knew it was risky, but the thought of hearing her final lie, capturing her secret conversation as she slipped out, was too tempting to resist. Saturday morning arrived, and the house was unusually silent as they moved through their usual routines. Michael lingered in the kitchen, pretending to read the newspaper, his heart pounding with anticipation. He watched as Rachel slipped into a more casual outfit than she'd normally wear around him, her gaze fixed on the door as she muttered something about running errands. "Have fun," he said, his tone cool, detached. She barely nodded, her hands gripping the handle of her purse a bit too tightly as she left. He waited until he heard her car pulling out of the driveway before retrieving the recording device, replaying her hushed words as she whispered to herself by the door, "Almost there, just a little longer." It was enough. He had caught her in the final lie, the very moment of her escape, and now, with every piece of evidence lined up, he could see the confrontation so clearly in his mind that it felt as if it had already happened. She was heading toward a reckoning she couldn't escape, and when she returned that evening, he would be waiting, ready to lay bare everything she thought she'd hidden away. Michael's heart drummed with a cold, quiet rhythm as he waited, alone in the dimly lit living room, a carefully assembled arsenal of proof laid out before him. Every photograph, every screenshot, and every single incriminating text message was printed, and ordered in a neat stack on the coffee table, a silent testimony to Rachel's betrayal. He had her words, her lies, her deceptions all carefully collected in one place. Tonight she'd face every last one. The house was still when he heard her car pull into the driveway, the gravel crunching under her tires. He glanced at his watch. It was 8:45 p.m. She was later than she'd told him she'd be, and the final deception seemed to carry a fitting irony. He straightened in his chair, his face impassive as he listened to her footsteps approaching, each step closer to the truth she would no longer be able to hide. The door opened and Rachel stepped inside, her face flushed, her eyes alight with a glow that was unmistakably not for him. She froze in the doorway when she saw him sitting there, her expression shifting to one of surprise and was it guilt, as she took in his composed, waiting figure. "Michael?" she asked, closing the door behind her, her voice faltering slightly. You're still up?" "Waiting for you," he replied evenly, his voice low and steady. He watched as her gaze flickered to the table, to the evidence of her lies displayed so plainly. She took a step back, a hand rising to her throat, her eyes widening as realization dawned. What is all this?" she asked, her voice shaky, her fingers trembling as she gestured toward the damning stack. "Everything," he replied, the word heavy in the air. "Everything I know. Everything you've lied about. Every single thing you tried to hide from me." He held her gaze, his calm exterior belying the months of betrayal he'd carried in silence. Rachel's mouth opened, but no words came out. She took a shaky breath, her shoulders slumping as she stared at the evidence, her carefully constructed world unraveling with each passing second. "Michael," she began, a forced, pleading smile stretching across her face. "I don't know what this looks like, but—" "Stop," he cut her off, his voice sharp. He leaned forward, his hands clasped as he spoke. "I know everything, Rachel, every single lie. I've been watching you, listening to you, giving you every opportunity to tell me the truth, and each time you chose to deceive me." He picked up a piece of paper from the stack, one of her texts to A. "Can't wait to see you again." He read aloud, his voice low, mocking. "Who were you saying that to, Rachel?" "Because it wasn't me." Her face blanched, the color draining as she realized the depth of his knowledge. Michael, it's not." "It's exactly what it looks like," he interrupted, his tone icy. "I have your messages, the love notes, the dates. Every lie you've told me about brunch with Sarah, every weekend plan that turned out to be nothing more than an excuse." He held up a small slip of paper, her half-written draft to A, where she confessed her fears of being caught. "You even knew I'd find out eventually. You were just too cowardly to say it to my face." Rachel staggered back, sinking into the chair opposite him, her expression a mixture of shock, guilt, and something that almost looked like shame. "Michael," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I never wanted it to go this far. I didn't know how to stop." "You didn't want to stop," he replied coldly. "If you'd wanted to, you would have. But you didn't. You chose this, Rachel. Every single time you chose this over me." She looked down, her hands shaking in her lap. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely audible, the words almost swallowed in the heavy silence. "I never meant to hurt you." He laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the quiet room. "You never meant to hurt me?" he repeated, incredulous. "Then what was this, Rachel? What did you think would happen?" Her eyes were wet now, and she shook her head, struggling to find the words. I was lost," she managed, her voice trembling. "I didn't know how to feel close to you anymore, and I was afraid of facing that. It was easier to pretend." "Pretend," he echoed, the word rolling off his tongue with distaste. "You've been pretending for months, maybe longer. And here I am, the fool, watching you lie to me day after day." He leaned back, crossing his arms as he let the truth settle between them. "I wanted to believe you. I wanted to trust you. But I was nothing more than an afterthought." Her face crumpled, and she looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "Please, Michael, I'll do anything. We can fix this. I can stop seeing him. I'll do whatever it takes." But Michael only shook his head, his expression resolute. "No," he said, his voice like steel. "I gave you every chance to come clean, Rachel, to tell me the truth. You didn't take it. Instead, you kept lying, covering it up, making me believe that I was the one who didn't understand. That's not something I can forgive." Silence fell over the room, deep and final, as the weight of his words sank in. Rachel looked at him, her face a mixture of despair and realization. She opened her mouth as if to protest, but nothing came out. They both knew that whatever bond they had shared was now irreparably shattered. After a long moment, Michael stood, gathering the stack of evidence and turning toward the door. "I'll be gone by morning," he said quietly, his voice stripped of any warmth. "You wanted to live a life without me. Well, now you have it." Without another word, he left her alone in the silence of their fractured home, the echo of his footsteps fading as he walked away from the life they had once shared. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of release, a painful yet undeniable freedom in leaving behind the lies, the hurt, and the betrayal. And as he closed the door behind him, he knew he'd never look back.